Welcome to the St. Luke's Health Talk series, where we bring virtual live opportunities to you, our community members. If you want to find additional offerings, please go to stlukesonline.org/health talks. I will advise you of our disclaimer today. The information in this video should not be construed as medical advice. The video is property of St. Luke's and will be made available to you for a limited time for educational purposes. And we have some housekeeping tips today. You will have an opportunity to ask questions. There's a Q&A icon on your screen. Please use that to select a question opportunity. Click on a question, type your question, and click the paper airplane icon to send. Feel free to type your questions throughout the presentation, and we will answer most of them at the end. Today, our health talk is Eating with the Seasons with Jennifer Leafy, registered dietitian and diabetes educator located at St. Luke's McCall. Welcome, Jennifer.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me and joining today. First and foremost, thank you all for joining me and taking your lunch hour for probably most of you to learn about the health advantages of eating with the seasons or eating seasonal foods. But I'll jump right in. My main goal today is to introduce the idea and the various benefits of eating with the seasons, with really the hope of guiding you towards a healthier lifestyle and in creating a diet that's maybe more plant-focused. So I hope you find the presentation informative and also encouraging to wherever you are at in your health journey. So let's jump right in. All right, so seasonal eating. Here we go, one more. All right, so in our modern world where we've got exotic foods that are shipped globally and virtually everything's always growing somewhere, it kind of makes us ask that question of what does in season really mean anymore? Before science played a role in agriculture, you could really only find fresh produce during the season and region that it grew best in, since produce relies on weather and other natural growing conditions. While advancements to science of the growing of food are not necessarily a bad thing, eating seasonally is a great way for us to kind of get back to living more naturally and encourages us to eat more essentially whole and fresh foods. So for the purpose of today's presentation, I'm going to refer to eating with the seasons or seasonal eating as generally eating foods that are naturally ready to harvest at the same time of year that you're eating them. In other words, eating seasonally means allowing Mother Nature and your local agriculture to guide the way in what you select. This means consuming foods grown in their natural growing and production seasons during a particular time of the year, harvested at their peak flavor, and can be categorized into each season of the year, what we would call winter, spring, summer, and fall, where we're at now. So eating with the seasons typically refers to produce, meaning just our fruits and vegetables and often herbs. However, there are some resources that you're going to come across if you choose to look into this further that may also include meat, fish, though their seasonality is a little bit different and is based on natural breeding, migratory patterns, or other human regulations designed to help prevent overconsumption. And really promoting sustainability. So today we're mainly going to focus on the produce side of eating with the seasons. So while eating in season can mean different things for different regions and countries, the general idea that I hope to impart today to you is that seasonal eating and the focus on incorporating those seasonal foods and produce into your menu is really a sustainable way of changing your diet that also does have some health advantages. So my main goal is not to impart any guilt for eating a strawberry or a tomato in January, because I think we're truly blessed to have great access and availability to foods year round, but to help you lean into that ebb and flow of what nature has to offer us and understand the nature or cyclical circle of our food system. So today I'm also going to talk a little bit about eating locally along with eating seasonally. Buying seasonal foods has a positive correlation with eating locally. They are related. They don't have to be, but because seasonal and local produce go hand in hand, I am going to focus a little bit on that. So if food is growing locally, the likelihood of it being in season in the region that you live in is, of course, very high. So You can just opt for general in-season foods like globally, but we'll talk a little bit about the local aspects as well too and the benefits to that. So let's dive in together and explore some of the benefits of eating with the seasons. All right, so I admittedly grew up in a region where produce was available locally year-round. This was Southern California. Farmers markets were extended into like our colder months in the fall and winter, and they started oftentimes well before the true heat of summer. But so growing up, I had a little bit of a different idea of what eating locally meant. I kind of had a lot of access to different foods. When I moved to Reno, Nevada and was doing my internship in Reno, I can recall the first time I was living in a studio, was all set up by myself, and I wanted to create a porch garden. So that was my goal. I went to the nursery, and my first idea was I love tomatoes. They're fairly easy to grow in a pot. So I will look to see what they have. I went to the nursery, I looked all around, I couldn't find them. And so I asked one of the nursery workers and said, do you have any tomato plants here? I can't seem to find them anywhere. And she kind of chuckled at me and said, we don't carry those this time of year anymore. They're far out of season. And I went, oh, wow, I'm used to being able to eat tomatoes well into November, depending on the climate down in Southern California. So this was kind of my first eye-opening experience, having moved and learning to live in different climates. So even as admittedly as a dietitian, I spend the majority of my time counseling sessions, encouraging individuals to eat a variety of different foods and build that colorful plate. I haven't always paid too close attention to eating with the seasons until, again, moving to those more rural mountain regions where the seasonality of food and limitations in growing seasons became more apparent. So I lived up in Truckee, California, again, similar to like McCall climate, snowy majority of the year, cold and snowy winter months. So eating in harmony with the seasons may also kind of seem like a trendy thing, a health fad, and something I'm sure individuals have stolen and used it for diet culture. But this concept really isn't all that new, and it's been a way of life for humans for thousands of years for good reasons. But many cultures have held close to the idea of eating in accordance with the seasons, and I believe that really it's a concept and a practice in our globalized, fast-paced world that we can all benefit from learning a little bit from. So some of the benefits of incorporating these seasonal foods as an integral part of our diet include improved freshness, taste, which I think most of us can attest to, improving the variety of the foods we eat, the ability to support our local economy and strengthen our community, and also be beneficial to our environment. So let's jump in and start with freshness and taste. My favorite. I think I could say probably the majority of us can all attest to the experience of eating maybe a fruit or vegetable that just didn't taste right. The best words I can kind of come up with to describe it would just be bland or flavorless or just blah, or like that pithy flavor, not much to it. Or maybe most of us have opted to choose a recipe and realize that that recipe we chose had some definitely out of season foods, but we went and got them anyways. And we were left with maybe feeling disappointed, or that we basically just got a good flavorless fiber punch. But a good example that I can also think of maybe is like watermelon or berries that really aren't that sweet, that were grown out of season and left us disappointed again. Or maybe you're like me, that you're just mostly frustrated you spent all that money only to be left sad that you didn't even get to enjoy the food that you worked hard to pay for. Just last week for my birthday, a friend brought me a bag of tomatoes that were homegrown in her garden up here in McCall, and I was pleasantly surprised at that full flavor profile as I cut open those tomatoes and just ate them straight. They didn't need anything added to them. They were a perfect side addition to a meal or just as a snack. But this was a great reminder on this topic of eating seasonally, that there are a lot of benefits, specifically as they relate to the flavor profile and that increase in nutrients that we find when foods are eaten in season. The quality of the nutrients, a lot of people don't realize in your fruits and vegetables, are also directly related to how long the produce has been sitting after it was harvested, or how late that fruit or vegetable was allowed to ripen and grow to peak maturity on the vine as well too. So there's certain Delicate nutrients specifically are B vitamins, vitamin C, and phytonutrients that are lost along the way. The term for it is nutrient degradation, or just a fancy word for a loss of those nutrients that deteriorate over time. Other things that can affect the nutrient quality of our food and even the taste, I'll go back, is the temperature changes, exposure to air, artificial light. All these things influence that nutrient content of our food. So if you're getting foods that are locally grown, which also likely means that they're in season, they're going to be reaching your plate a lot sooner after harvest, preserving some of those beneficial nutrients. And so I would say, do these benefits mean you should just completely avoid fruits and vegetables altogether if you can't purchase them in season or at home? And I would say, of course, as a dietitian, of course not, but we can certainly look at this as a motivator to do so. Our next one is benefit is food diversity, and one that holds close to my heart as a dietitian. But eating foods that are in season can help to reduce our health risks. It can increase the nutrient quality of our diet, so the more nutrients, and also can really help from us getting bored with food. So they can broaden, eating with the seasons can really broaden your food horizons by switching things up on your plate. It can also really help with that simple idea that if you're paying more attention to what's in season, you're more likely to eat a diverse diet and consume more of those fresh and whole foods. Most of us, I would say, or a lot of us, are creatures of habit, and we live busy lives. We have kids, we've got jobs. So it's really understandable to repeat familiar meals and rotate familiar foods, but there are a slew of other benefits to filling your plate with a variety of those different colors and foods. If you're like me, maybe you lean towards the side of boredom with food and eating, and maybe seasonal items can help to promote that creativity at mealtime. Up here in McCall, we're fortunate to have dedicated farmers that provide produce for purchase to the local community. And this summer, I tried a few new food items from Stegner Farms, so a little shout out to Stegner Farms for all the hard work that they do. And the first was garlic scape. So it's like a thin, vibrant green stalk that grows from the garlic bulb, and it looks really similar to a cross between a chive and a scallion. And I also tried an Armenian cucumber, which was just a variety I had never come across before and eaten. So I thought this was fun. It kind of made it exciting to try something new. It was also really fun to look up new recipes and experiment with these new items. And it's also a great way to involve other family members or even kids if you have them in the kitchen as well. So the 2020 to 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans advise incorporating more fruits and vegetables in our diet as part of just a general healthy dietary pattern. And the sad thing is that in 2019, only 1 in 10 American adults met those recommendations for intake of fruits and vegetables. And we can probably assume that that didn't get any better through the COVID era, as people were isolating and not out eating fresh foods or getting canned packaged foods, things that were going to last them a long time at home. We also know from research that eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can reduce the risk of many of our leading causes of illness and death in the US and in the worldwide, such as cardiovascular disease, your type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and it can also really help with weight management as well too. Again, it's sad that despite all the known positive benefits of eating more fruits and vegetables, few adults still meet these recommendations. So, and the recommendations are 1.5 to 2 cups of fruits and 2 to 3 servings of vegetables a day. So if we shift our thinking or focus to seasonal eating, it's a really great strategy towards helping us get closer to those recommendations that aren't really just not only essential for good health and nutrition, but can be a preventative measure to improving our health and keeping us healthy in the long run. Seasonal eating can also really help us to eat the rainbow. I know it's kind of like a silly concept maybe we teach kids, but in my practice, even with adults, I ask them to consider that. What does their plate look like? It's a great way to just encourage an increase in intake of phytonutrients, which are compounds that give those plants those rich colors and their distinctive taste and aroma. And when consumed by humans, they can protect us from those chronic diseases as well. Remember, I always think the saying goes, variety is the spice of life, and changing seasons kind of constantly provide us with a refreshing twist to what's offered. And really, eating with the seasons can provide a rotation of those nutrients, may even contribute to longevity and decrease your risk for those chronic diseases or metabolic syndrome. So eat the rainbow. It's an easy way. Look at your plate. How many colors do you have?
That's a great tip, Jennifer. There's a question in the chat that asks, what did that varietal of cucumber taste like? And I think you mentioned the Armenian cucumber.
Armenian cucumber, yeah. It was, I don't know, the explanation of what a cucumber tastes like is kind of like, there's not much flavor to it, really. But I think it was really refreshing. It was crisp. And then I actually used it with vinegar and sesame seeds and made more of like a little Asian salad with it too. So the vinegar probably took over a majority of the flavor in it anyways. But
yeah, I had an Armenian cucumber recently too. It was, I would say it was very mild, but and very full of water, and the skin, and the skin is edible.
Yeah, and it's pretty. It's like a lighter color as well too. And the skin wasn't as hard as maybe your normal, the generic cucumber you'd find at the grocery store.
Yes. And then we did have another comment that said, I love trying new fruits and vegetables.
I love it. That's the best part. And then sharing the things that you learn with other people too.
Yes. And I'll put in the plug to please type in more questions, and we'll intermittently take them or save some of them for the end.
Perfect. Great.
Thanks.
The next benefit is supporting local. As I mentioned before, eating with the seasons doesn't have to require that you buy locally grown food, because in season could mean that a food item is in season elsewhere, not in the region that you live in, but it is the easiest way to find in-season produce in your area. So again, eating locally also translates to typically eating seasonally as well. Eating seasonally local foods can support our local farmers, our farms. It helps to fund our local economy. It allows farmers to really inform you about how the foods they grow were grown. It reduces that need for pesticides and chemicals, and also reduces expenses due to the abundance of supply in that region. So when you purchase local foods, that money you spend on the product from local farmers and growers stays back in your community and is reinvested with other local businesses. The foods that are produced, processed, and distributed locally also create job opportunities, which is something, especially in our area, we need a lot more jobs. Or it can also feel really good just supporting your local farmer, or I would just call them your neighbor if they're close by putting money back in their pockets. You know that money, where the money is going, it's going to support their families, and that they care about the quality of the food that they grow, the soil that they cultivate it from, and ultimately they care about their customer because they want you to come back and they want to build that relationship. So this also means contributing to that bottom line of small businesses in your immediate proximity. So if you are somebody who has ever been involved with or know how hard it can be to keep a small business going, this, having that support from local people really does make a big difference. So, and I can attest to that in McCall. A lot of businesses don't stay here for very long, and the ones that do tend to have that strong local support. So you could also choose to support local by supporting local restaurants that source those seasonal foods or local foods from the farmers in your area as well too. So. Connection. So one of my favorite parts about eating with the seasons really is the ability to bring about connection. And what I mean by connection, it's connection with the world around us and our community, creating a better understanding of that energy that's put into growing our foods. And I don't, when we go to the grocery store and we just get it, throw it in our cart, take it home and cook it, we often miss that whole part, that love and the time and the effort that was put into growing our food. So I kind of learned this a little bit. I was working in an inner city farm in college, and I was blown away when when I would watch these kids who lived in food deserts come and pick out a carrot from the ground and realize like, oh my gosh, for the first time they realize a carrot came from the ground, and that's how it got to the grocery store. And that was like seeing those kids build that connection. I think our relationship with food's directly related to knowing where that food was produced, who by, and how. So I think eating in-season foods that are also locally grown can help to really cultivate that sense of appreciation and gratitude for what's on our plates and increase our mindfulness around food as well. Mindfulness is kind of a topic of interest for a lot of people, or has been in the past, but that idea can really help us to be more in tune with our bodies, improve our digestion, and be present during our eating experiences, which, you know, if you weren't aware of, is half the fun too. So I love how I saw this quote by David Henry Thoreau, and he put it, live each season as it passes, breathe the air, drink the drink, taste the fruit, resign yourself to the influences of each. And I think eating with the seasons can bring us back to our roots by helping us to tune into the natural world around us and adapt to the changing of seasons. And that next point about healthy social connection, when I was talking about eating with the seasons, somebody asked me, or this came up in conversation, and I encourage you to think about it too in your own experiences, but try and think about comparing the interactions you've had in your local produce section at maybe a major chain grocery store to that of a farmer's market, or maybe a co-op, or a smaller store that's maybe closer to where that food actually came from. What's the difference? Like, how does that connection and that community differ? And I thought about that. I was like, my goodness, I rarely ever talk to the grocer at Albertsons or Ridley's, and not that those places are bad, but we can benefit from the connection that we get from talking to our farmer at a farmer's market, engaging in conversation, having social encounters, sharing different recipes that you use for that food that was grown that week and sold, discussing local happenings and events, meeting and greeting and hanging out with some of your friends and neighbors. Those maybe food farmers markets are going to be a more festive atmosphere with music. And then this idea of connection is really not just supporting our physical health, but our emotional health as well too. These are often places where people are cheerful, they're laughing, they're fellowshipping, they're enjoying good food and fun together. So we can see that eating with the seasons while doing so locally can serve to benefit not only, again, our physical health, but our mental and emotional health as well too. And it's something not to forget that health is more than just the food that we put in our body. It's connection, it's our environment, it's relationships as well too. And so I think I had a really good experience with this, because every week that I go and pick up Stegner Farm stuff, which isn't every week, but you know, when I see something that, oh, I'll try that. He hangs out in the parking lot, one of the owners, the farmers, and he always, when I tell him, oh, I got this week, eggplant, I'm going to make eggplant Parmesan. And he always throws in, oh, hey, this is what our family did with it this week. And I find that so valuable, because it's just that connection, and then also learning from each other, which is a great thing that eating seasonally can really help to promote. The second to last benefit is affordability. So when many of us think healthier foods or fruits and vegetables, we're often associating them with higher costs, though. But when it comes to seasonal foods, if they're in season, the supply of them is higher or up, which in turn causes the cost to go down. So if you can recall back to that economy class maybe a long time ago, that word supply and demand, when goods are rare, the demand for them goes up and then those prices increase. So eating with the seasons, without having to even eat locally, eating what's globally in season is a really great way to reduce your costs, or your grocery costs. So according to the USDA, this occurs because making them available off season requires more attention to the packaging, transporting, supply chains. So think all these things needed to make strawberries available maybe in the winter time is what's going to raise those retail prices for us. So and you know, I've seen that. I've gone to the grocery store in the middle of winter and like, why is this watermelon, you know, $20? because it's not, maybe not in season. So our food system, of course, is really complicated. There's a lot that goes into the varying costs of our food, how they get to us, but that general idea holds true. Seasonal fruits and vegetables that are harvested in season and are abundant means that they're going to tend to sell for a lower price during their peak season. So we can all use some support in the affordability of groceries right now too. And then lastly, on our benefits to seasonal eating is it's an opportunity to support our environment. I'll just put this disclaimer out there. I don't claim to be an environmental professional. There are people who spend their whole life studying these things. But in general, the overall picture that kind of appears is that fruit and vegetables with the lowest greenhouse gas emissions are those that are grown outside their natural season without much use of additional energy and consumed in that same country or region. So studies do show that locally grown foods, which means they're probably in season, generally require a lot less travel time to reach your fork. But there's also other contributors to that as well. Your artificial lighting, the heating that it costs to heat the greenhouses, refrigeration for storage, and then storage methods to get the food where it needs to go. These things also all contribute to our environment as well. So I would say this topic is quite complicated and just one aspect to eating with the seasons and eating maybe in a more sustainable way. But I do want you to remember that global seasonality has helped not only expand global food markets, but helped to provide a more varied and consistent supply of those fruits and vegetables all year round, helping to increase the diversity of your diet. So there are some, pros and cons. We're lucky that we can access these foods from all over the world and eat a diet that's, super varied. So there's definitely some pros and cons to that. But remember, more diversity helps to make sure you get a good balance of micronutrients throughout the year, especially if you're like me, you live in a region where half the year you feel like it's snowing, or maybe it really is. So what I'm not saying really is that only eat in season local foods and like starve yourself until the last frost and food's grown in your region again. But just be aware, know where your food comes from, can help us to be responsible and make those healthier choices when we're informed. So I do also truly the second to last point on there, I believe we're a lot more likely to care for our environment when we're connected to it. And that goes to say with anything, it's hard to care about something if you have no tie to it. But for those who are raising kids or even for your own self, helping them to learn or you to learn and develop a true connection with our environment is beneficial when we can connect it to the food that we eat every single day that nourishes our body. All right, so getting started. How do you eat within the season? That's the main point of today. And I think with any new idea or health habit, I think it can be overwhelming. So I'm going to point you in a couple of good directions towards some resources that are going to get you moving and get you implementing these seasonal foods into your everyday eating habits. So again, I think knowledge is power, and when we really can't implement seasonal foods if we don't know which ones are. Some of the resources I'm going to point out today are specific to Idaho, and some are maybe more broad. Different states will have different access or availability to resources that are going to show you what's local to your region. So I'm going to focus mostly on Idaho. Normally, I feel like I spend half my time in client sessions encouraging them, like, please don't go to Google for health advice. But in the case of this topic, I think Google can be your best friend for learning about what's growing in season in your region too. So the first point, and I'm going to pull up the website for you guys, is Idaho Preferred. This is a program of the Idaho State Department of Agriculture that identifies and promotes Idaho food and agriculture products and connects those farmers and ranchers to us, the consumer, restaurants, retailers, and even schools, which is cool. So I'll pull this guy up here. You should be able to see this. So here's their website, idahopreferred.com. That picture on the left that was on the slide earlier, you can download their printable calendar. It's like a quick version of that. And on their website here, it shows everything that's seasonal in Idaho and when. Seasonally grown in Idaho and what time of the year. So I love this. It goes by the months up here and all the different foods. If we go down to the bottom, like pumpkins, you can look that pumpkins are generally in season September, October, and November. And the great thing is you can click on each of those items and it will pull up some tidbits on pumpkins. Some of them will also have information on how to choose items that are ripe, or and then also shows you producers of those foods locally in Idaho. And then there's also some great recipes on the bottom, which I think is half the fun. It's finding something good to eat. So I hope you guys can take some time to explore that website. There's a lot of good stuff. Maybe print out that in-season calendar. This month, September, there's a lot of great things that are in season, so take advantage of that. Our next one is Idaho Food Works. That's a project of the University of Idaho's Extension's Northern District Community Food Systems Program. Big words. I don't know how up to date some of this stuff is, but I found it really useful and kind of fun just to explore. And it has a list of the Idaho food directories. I'll click on one so you can see it. I'll just click on Northern Idaho since it's the top one. And on this website, it loads for us. You can select items up at the top on the map. So let's do farmers markets, and it's going to pull up all the farmers markets in your area, farm to table restaurants that have been, registered on here, community gardens, food banks, farms and ranches. There's a lot of really great resources on here as well too. So have fun with that, explore it. I think it's pretty neat how they put that all together. And it does go by the different regions as well too. There's one for West Central Mountains, and then Treasure Valley too. Maybe a lot of people are down in that area. So yeah, there's some seasonal recipes on this site as well too. The blog, again, I think this would be a great resource for people to get started in this. Then there's a more generic kind of seasonal food guide. This isn't specific to Idaho, which is nice. So if you live elsewhere and you're tuning in, you can select the state that you live in. We'll just do Idaho for here. You can select the month that you're curious about, let's say late September, and any produce. So let's see, it's like select apples. It's going to show you generally what times of the month those foods are locally grown in season too. So it's really great. And then there's items for learn to cook. And same thing, kind of similar to that Idaho preferred one. It's going to give you some fun facts about those foods, different varieties that are available, the seasonality of them, and then also some storing, cooking, preserving, and even some nutrition tips at the bottom. And then some others.
Yeah, those are great websites. We put them in the chat for people, and we had just a few comments.
Gotcha.
Get to those. It was two comments about the questions for where do we find lists of seasonal fruit, and you answered all of those. So
you have a list. I even printed that one out and left it in our clinic here, so it's kind of fun, as you're learning, teaching other people about what you're learning too.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Where are we at? I'm gonna go back one. I missed it. Okay, so next, some other kind of tips and tricks for getting started. Of course, shopping at your local farmers market. That's like the #1 place that you're going to find in season locally grown foods. This link here, I'm going to click on this first one, is the Idaho Farmers Market Association. It'll be in season if it's at your farmer's market. So it eliminates that kind of thought process of even having to figure out what's in season, what's not. If it's there, it's in season in your region. So you can select find a farmer's market on here. And there is, it should come up, directory guide here. And there is a full directory of all those things. That's that next link as well too. This is just another way to get to it, but you can print this out. I'm in region 4 here, so it's going to show all the locations and which farmers markets are active, and this is active from 2022. You can also scan this little Idaho barcode and it will pull this up for you. This is also made by Idaho Preferred, so that same calendar of local fresh in season foods is there. And then if you're not sure which region you're in, you can look down below on that little section too. So this is a great resource to start with. And then something really unique is that if you do use SNAP benefits, they have a double up food bucks program. Some farmers markets in Idaho will double your food stamp benefits up to, it's like $20 match per market visit on fruits and vegetables. I'm pretty sure up here in McCall or Donnelly Farmers Market does that program. So that's something else if you're trying to make your stretch your food dollars, but you're still wanting to choose healthy foods or healthier, maybe local in-season foods. That's a great opportunity for you to do that as well. St. Luke's, of course, for those of you who are St. Luke's staff, you know that, or employees, they have the pop-up produce program, and that's really just an opportunity to make farm fresh produce conveniently available to all of us employees each week during the growing season, which is around June to October. And that's kind of how I've got hooked up with Stegner Farms up here as well too. So it's worked. And then an easy way is just try to grow something edible. Maybe not tomatoes in December like I tried, but sprouts is a really easy one too. It might not seem in season, but it's something that you can grow in your home in the wintertime if you struggle to get in fruits and vegetables at that time of the year. And then cook something new. Remember that you don't have to jump into this like with everything you have. I choose to just pick 1 or 2 foods every week or every other week from a local farm, the Stegner, and practice incorporating those foods in different ways. So it doesn't have to be something crazy. It could just be adding 1 new vegetable in a week would be a great way to incorporate in some more seasonal eating. Learn a new skill, dry, preserve, pickling. These are all kind of some fun ways, and maybe even some good fall activities if the weather changes that you can incorporate in. I'm really not in the business of food rules, but I think some people might consider when you're reading drying, preserving, and pickling in-season foods is not considered in season. But again, I'm not in the business of food rules. I think any skill learned in the kitchen is really a great skill to have. So no food rules. The other thing you can do is just talk to your local grocer, have a conversation with them. A couple weeks ago, I talked to our local grocer at Albertsons, and he was very knowledgeable, and I was pleasantly surprised to realize that majority of all the food that came into Albertsons up in McCall was shipped to Salt Lake City, and from Salt Lake City came up to us. So there's a lot of food miles in there. I think there was only one item, and it was some watermelon that was grown locally down near the Boise area. So I was kind of shocked, thinking, okay, we would probably have some more up here. So I encourage you to just talk, have that conversation with them. Maybe look for those local labels. You'll probably see those more in our bigger cities like the Boise region. Look for that tag called Idaho Grown. Those are easy ways to find in-season local produce too. So local generally will be referred to as like 100 and 150 miles from where it was grown, but that definition can kind of vary depending on what resource you're looking at. Another great one, especially this time of year, would be to visit a U-Pick farm apple season. So a lot of people are hopefully doing that, making a date or a fun family activity out of that. And then lastly, or second to last, is joining a CSA. And this is a community-supported agriculture where consumers can buy shares, or you and I can buy shares of farms, like a farm's harvest in advance. They can often have them delivered straight to you, or there's a pickup location or at the farm. It's kind of like a subscription program to a farm. So that's a great opportunity to get produce for a longer period of time and consistently. And then, of course, like we talked about before, supporting a farm-to-table restaurant. And there are some articles online that you can type in, or a couple of those websites that I showed you will show restaurants that support a farm-to-table, the farm-to-table idea. Okay. And then just of note, I'd like to highlight a few of Idaho's fall in-season produce that I love, and I would encourage you to try and offer you some tips for incorporating them into your menu. Right now, apples, beets, carrots, leafy greens, dark leafy greens, potatoes, shout out to the potatoes, onions, and winter squash are all in season in Idaho. So apples are a great addition to a healthy diet. They contain fiber, both that soluble and insoluble fiber, which can be really beneficial to keeping our gut healthy and also keep us regular. Apples contain pectin, which is a type of soluble fiber that can actually have a modest effect on lowering that LDL, what we would consider our bad cholesterol. They're a great kind of alternative to sweets if you're craving, as that winter season comes and we want those more cozy, comforting foods, can be a good alternative to that. And then they're high in vitamin C, which can help us get to fighting those back to school and winter colds. So here's a couple ideas for you guys. Feel free to take a picture or just take note of some of these ideas of how you can incorporate apples in. Roasting apples with butternut squash and sweet potatoes, which are also in season. It's an interesting but fun way to kind of add some sweetness to some of your food too. Okay. And then beets. I think beets are so underrated, but if you can, working beets into your diet is a really great way to also boost your fiber. And you'll notice that's kind of a recurring theme with all these plant foods that are high in fiber. But you can also eat the beet greens, which a lot of people don't realize too. Chopping them up and sauteing them is a really great way to add, make a side dish for your meal too. Beets are really high in nitrates, which help to open up our blood vessels. That can help lower our blood pressure. It can actually help increase our athletic performance as well, and our brain function. There's been a lot of research on beet juice specifically for exercise and activity, specifically because they help to increase blood flow. They're also really high in potassium. They can make those blood vessels more flexible, which is really beneficial to your heart health or cardiovascular health. And then the color, what beets are known for, they stain your fingers and everything else if you're cooking them. But eating each different beet with their different colors, those different pigments provide those different compounds or bioactive compounds that have potential health benefits in reducing inflammation in our body, which is, I call like a fancy term for stress on a cellular level, supporting your liver, and lots more. If you don't like beets, I would encourage you. I hope you learn to love them. They do taste a little earthy. I think if you cook them, they're, of course, less of that earthy taste, but there's some great ways you can add those into your diet. Carrots, also a very underrated item. For the longest time, people were afraid of carrots because they have carbs in them, I think. But carrots are affordable. They're usually a lot cheaper than majority of our other vegetables. So they're good for the budget. I think most of us know them for having beta carotene, which is that content in them that gives them their red-orange pigment and gets converted into vitamin A and is beneficial for eye health. But they also contain other B vitamins, biotin, vitamin B6, vitamin K, and potassium as well too. So roasted carrot fries is one of my favorites as a great alternative to French fries. And then your dark leafy greens, I would say these pack a nutritional punch. They're a power horse with nutrition. They supply a large amount of, or significant amount of folate. That's a B vitamin that promotes heart health and certain birth defects as well too. So those individuals who are trying to conceive, it's really a necessary nutrient for DNA duplication and repair, which and can also kind of prevent against the development of cancer as well too. So they also have a great source of vitamin K in them, which protect our bones from osteoporosis and other inflammatory diseases. So and magnesium. I mean, they have all kinds of stuff in them that, magnesium helps with nerve function and muscle and nerve function as well too. If you're not a huge fan of dark leafy greens, and I'm not referring to just kale, there's lots of other ones, turnip greens, mustard greens, broccoli rabi, all kinds of alternatives. You may not like that bitterness that comes with a lot of those. And a tip to help tame that bitterness is to blanch them in water, and that can really help to kind of tune that out. And then also pairing them with something a little bit sweeter too can be a great way to like them if you do not. Okay. And almost towards the end here are potatoes. We cannot forget potatoes, especially in Idaho. Are the ones we're famous for, spuds. But again, these are also another underrated food that are a great staple to a healthy diet, and I think can often be a little bit over villainized. Just because a food is white does not mean that it's void of nutrients. It's usually what we also do with that food that makes it maybe healthier or less healthy for us. So I really do think potatoes can be incorporated into a healthy diet. And maybe instead of eating them deep fried or loading them up with all the other lovely additions we like, you can be mindful of the portion and what you do with them, and that's a great way to incorporate them in. If you struggle with digesting these types of kind of more rapidly absorbed carbohydrates, being mindful of that portion and then pairing them with a protein food or a fat food can also really help to slow down how quick they raise your blood sugar or get absorbed. So if potatoes don't work for you too, though, remember that there's lots of other foods loaded with potassium and vitamin C, so don't stress it. You've got lots of other options. Again, these are also a great budget-friendly option. They're warm and comforting for the winter months, and they're a great fuel, a quick source of fuel for an active lifestyle. And a little tip, if you leave on the skin, you're going to be getting a lot more of those benefits because a lot of that is in the skin. Okay. And our last, almost second to last one, food is onions. Again, another underrated addition to your diet. I think most people focus on, okay, it's white, it must not have a lot of nutrients in it. But onions do have vitamin C and B vitamins. They also have special flavonoid compound called quercetin, which is responsible for that yellow brown skins on certain varieties. And this can be really helpful, a benefit to protecting our heart. It's an antioxidant and has anti-inflammatory effects and activities. So try to keep as much skin on it as possible within reason. You don't need to eat the skin, but a lot of that is in there. Easy ways that you can still save that is by using it when you're making or cooking broth, roasting, you can take out afterwards, or even cooking rice is another way to keep some of that skin and get the benefits from it. They also contain sulfur compounds that play a really large cancer preventative role. They found. Whatever. This last little quote that I found that I really love, it's by Mary Ann Leela, and she directs the Plants for Human Health Institute at North Carolina State University. Way far from us here, but love her thought process. She says, plants are the master chemists because plants can't move around. They have to manufacture what they need, not just to grow, but to defend, protect, and heal themselves. It makes sense that the compounds plants produce in response to stress would help a human under similar circumstances. It also makes sense that plants would concentrate many of these protective compounds in their outer coverings, skins and peels, and various roots and fruits, the point where most environmental assaults will likely occur. So plants are incredible. Okay, and then yes, our last food here, and my absolute favorite, is winter squash. For many of us, this indicates the start of fall or those winter months. Or maybe it's a more healthier way of signaling the start of this cooler weather. If you're having it, first maybe a pumpkin spice latte, which a lot of us will think is the signal. But winter squash are incredibly versatile. They provide a lot of carotenoids, beta carotene, that precursor for vitamin A, lutein, zeaxanthin, vitamin C, B, magnesium, potassium, all kinds of good stuff. So, and of course, they are incredibly great fiber source as well. There's a lot of different varieties. Some of them ones you may be more familiar with in the US, but some of those might be your acorn, your spaghetti, the butternut squash, but also delicata, kabocha, even pumpkin or red curry are some other great ones to experiment with. Their thick shells make them really good for extended shelf life. It's something you can keep on there and throw in the oven as a last minute meal if you don't have anything planned. The skins, I think, are the toughest for most people to figure out, what the heck do I do with this? In my experience, I watched a video on cutting butternut squash, you cut it in half and then use your peeler, like your cucumber peeler type thing, to get that skin off too. So Google it, find some different ways that you can address the skin. Some of the skins are actually edible as well too. So it depends on, you know, what you're into texture wise, but generally the thinner skins are going to be more palatable and pleasant in their texture. Like delicata squash, I've eaten the skins on those, and those can be really great. You can also save those skins if you do choose to remove them and put those in a stock as well too. Yeah, so butternut squash are wonderful. They're also a lower carbohydrate, starchy vegetable that are really high in fiber, so that slows that digestion and absorption, resulting in maybe a less blood sugar spike following a meal or snack, if that's something that you're concerned about. Yeah, and also don't forget to eat the seeds. Pumpkin seeds aren't the only ones that you can cook. You can cook butternut, spaghetti, and acorn squash seeds as well too, for a nice snack throughout the week. Okay, and lastly, as I wrap things up, I want everyone to remember eating with the seasons is not a fad diet. It's just a simple concept to help you incorporate more nutrients into your diet, become connected with the food and the way it's grown, and honor what's really naturally abundantly available to us. As a dietitian, one of my main goals is to really help promote health, but never, ever, ever at the expense of other important areas in our life, like our mental health. So I hope today that you remember to keep in mind your relationship with food and the ultimate goal of cultivating a positive relationship with it. I encourage you to focus on what you can add to your diet versus take away, and know that this idea isn't about cutting foods out that aren't in season, but instead focusing really on adding more of those that are. I also think it is incredibly important to keep in mind that if you live in a place where seasonal fruits and vegetables can be really hard to come by, I'm gonna call it certain times of the years, maybe extreme climates, you live in a food desert, or you even struggle maybe with food insecurity, having enough to put on the table, it can be difficult to eat seasonally. But more important than eating seasonal really is making sure that you get the nourishment that your body needs. Do your best to support a sustainable lifestyle or this goal, but always, of course, put your health first. So remember, tune into your body and listen closely. You'd be pretty surprised what it has to say, and consider taking just small steps towards a healthier you to avoid that all or nothing trap that we often fall into when we're working towards incorporating new behaviors. My hope for you today is that the idea of eating seasonally makes you look forward to each and every season ahead, and the wonderful and nourishing foods that they provide us. Thank you everybody for listening in, and I hope you're inspired to eat something new and in season.
Thank you, Jennifer. I know I was very inspired. I loved the foods that you called out. You got a lot of the rainbow in your individual information on some of those items. Thank you very much. There was just one other comment in the chat. Oh, there's maybe another one that someone said they loved beets with hummus on a pita and feta.
Do you cook it? Cooked?
I assume cooked. This is
yeah.
Yeah.
And
then it's, yeah, that sounds like a great recipe. And thanks so much. I can tell you love food as much as I do, as another person commented.
I would say it would be, you know, a lot of dietitians are foodies at heart, right? They love food. They love the like closeness it brings people together. There's so much more to it than just health and nutrition.